Call to order. Today's April 3rd, 2013. We're here for unfinished business related to a bill to adopt the revised Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan. For the record, minutes of the previous meetings were distributed in advance to Member Ingrid in advance of her attending today's meeting. May I ask for DVP representative, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission and the audience, my name is Rainy Young, for the record. I'm the planner for the Department of Planning and Permitting, assigned to manage this project and to represent the department's position on the proposed revised Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan. In response to the Commission's request for information related to the potential number of dwelling units, we have some information available for you today. Beginning with the map on the wall, just want to give you some background. This shows the entire area of Honolulu, basically all along this area, that are within the zoning districts that permit dwellings. And those would be R5, R7.5, and the country district. And the country district needs to be those that are within the state land use urban district. The colors represent in the yellow, that would be the R5. The very light yellow is R7.5, and of course the country green. Now, you notice there's some bar charts here emanating from each of the properties that have potential for additional dwellings. The brown bars indicate the number of potential dwellings that could be established, whereas the black bars indicate those that are existing. And the way to read the bars is that every inch of length is equal to about 93 dwelling units. Now the map that I handed out for you on the 17 by 11 inch is essentially looking at this area here from, let's say, Ha'ula out to the little past Kahuku. And the reason for that is we could have reduced this entire map to 11 by 17 instead of legible. But I think this would be the main area of interest, as those appear to have the most potential, as you can see by the length of the brown colors here. And again, it's the same scale same scale in terms of the legend on your handout. 1 inch equals about 92 units. Now the potential units is not including the existing units. So the black bar is exclusive of the potential dwelling units. Now, our assignment was to look at the potential for dwellings within zoned land, and we considered zoned lands to mean residential, country, and apartment. And we didn't find any apartment districts. That's why you don't see it on the map here. So what we did find was there's only potential in R5, mainly R7.5, and of course country. We have to also look at things like slope. And so we only calculated those parcels that had slopes below 20%, because in excess of that, it will be difficult to put in dwelling units on a large scale basis. And of course, we wanted to know the ownership. So we did break it down into 4 main owners: private, city-owned, state-owned, and a total. So just let me give you the numbers. These are raw numbers for now. So the potential we found in the private areas, zoned residential and country, was about 3,588 units. We found about 174 units in the city-owned property and about 594 units in state-owned property, for a total of about 4,356 potential units. Now, it's just the word potential because we should consider other matters or other constraints that would limit this potential, or would take away from this maximum potential. One of which is the flood zone. Now, if you look at the second map that I gave you, color map, it shows within the area of interest, flood zone distance. And you can see on the scale, on the legend on the right, that you have colors red, blue, dark blue, purple, and what looks like to be salmon. Now, all those areas that are designated those respective flood districts must comply with the flood hazard ordinance, comply with those requirements. And also the VE right below that, which is the wave action, areas affected by wave action. So development in these areas would be constrained by compliance with this, would generally mean higher costs involved for construction and permitting. So you'll notice, if you compare that to the other map that I gave you, you see a bunch of those properties, even including the Brigham Young sites, is affected by flood areas. The other things to consider as a constraint to the potential are sites. Some of these sites already have development on it, even though there's a bar emanating from it. For example, like Honolulu High School. That's this site right over here. It has this tall bar, roughly about 2 inches, maybe 1.75 inches, which gives you the impression you could put maybe a couple iron units there, but it's actually Honolulu High School. Then above that, there's this other tall bar here. Those are on properties owned by the city and county. And if you compare with the flood map, I spoke with the staff at the Department of Community Services and asked them, oh, we noticed we have some vacant lands there and there's some potential for development. And they explained to me that it's included in the flood area and construction of affordable housing there would make it perhaps uneconomical. And if you move on down towards the southeast, there's several vacant lots here that have potential. Those are in private ownership, basically Continental Pacific. And I decided to take a look at Continental Pacific on the web and found that it's basically a land investment company. And just like what they do, they buy land, they have some kind of improvements done on it. It could be permitting for others, and then they resell it for investors. The only property that's for sale today is the golf course. Unfortunately, that's zone preservation. And if you move further down to Malaekahana Bay, there's a bunch of parcels here that has some potential, perhaps a total of maybe 100 units, somewhere around there. That's owned by the state, proposed for the expansion of the Malaekahana State Park. Now the next potential site would be in the area of Laie. And this long bar here, roughly about maybe 6 inches long, representing some perhaps 600 potential dwelling units, that comes right off of the site of the BYU campus. And if you look at the color map, you can kind of see some of the features underneath the blue and red flood areas. You see that most of it is already in university use or church use. You can see a couple large open grass fields right in front of the church, which we kind of consider to be the great lawn of the LDS church. And so perhaps some of that could be available. Of course, again, this is in private use. And next to that, we have other smaller sites. Of course, that is also owned by the church, which is the square right here. That could give you maybe 150 units, someplace over there. And there's a school right across that. I suspect that's a DOE facility there. And we can move further down the coast. The next sizable lot is right at Kokololio Park, and that's proposed for park expansion, I believe. And then, of course, further on down the coast, there's not much potential down there. Most of those lots are small, healthy private ownership. So I guess the bottom line is, if you were to take much of those constraints into consideration, that 4,300 units would be perhaps substantially smaller. Now, getting back to the department's position, I just want to reiterate that we are in support of the proposed plan that was submitted before you. We did have a few small changes as recommended by the Board of Water Supply and the Department of Emergency Management, and we were okay with the text changes. And essentially, we had a small correction. We found that one of the acronyms for the Honolulu Emergency Services Department, the acronym is DES, and it referred to the Department of Emergency Management, which is incorrect, so I think we should make a small correction there. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Raymond. Members, any questions on Raymond's presentation? Member Ozan.
So your estimation is on, well, first of all, it's a procedural question. How do you guys zone or approve zoning in a flood zone area? In other words, how did they get their entitlements to begin with?
I'm not exactly sure, but my suspicion is that a lot of the zoning occurred prior to the current flood zoning as designated now. And over the years, the flood designations have also changed, either in response to flood improvements or changes in the natural habitat, and of course, past storm events.
So did you guys look at, if you took out all the flood zone areas, and you took out all the unusable land zone, how many actual units?
Based on the limited time we had, we do not have a figure for you today, but all I can say is it could be substantially less. I cannot back that up at this point. If you would like, we can continue our research into the matter and take an in-depth look at each of the constraints.
Yes, some of the testimony was that there was about 500 units that were previously zoned or approved that were not built.
Within the Brigham Young property.
They didn't specify, just within the region. So if you, I guess if you take out all the flood zone, all the unusable zone property, it's 500 good number.